Dear students, the purpose of this chapter is to improve your effectiveness in training and developing employees. The topics we discuss include managing the appraisal interview, learning objectives. By the end of this video, you are expected to 1. Understand how to manage the appraisal interview. Managing the appraisal interview. The traditional periodic appraisal typically culminates in an appraisal interview. Here, the manager and the subordinate review the appraisal and make plans to remedy deficiencies and reinforce strengths. These interviews are often uncomfortable. Few people like to receive or give negative feedback. Adequate preparation and effective implementation are essential. How to conduct the appraisal interview. Useful interviews begin before the interview. Beforehand, review the person's job description. Compare performance to the standards and review the previous appraisals. Give the employee at least a week's notice to review his or her work. Set a time for the interview. Interviews with lower-level personnel like clerical workers should take less than an hour. Interviews with management employees often take 1 or 2 hours. Conduct the interview privately with no interruptions. How to conduct the appraisal interview? Preparation means understanding the problem and the employee. Here the manager will watch the employee to see what he or she is doing, review productivity data, and observe the workflow. How to conduct the appraisal interview? Planning the solution is next. This requires reaching agreement on the problem and laying out a change plan in the form of steps to take. Measure success. Date to complete. Coach. With agreement on a plan, the manager can then start the actual coaching. Useful guidelines in conducting the appraisal interview include 1. Talk in terms of objective work data. Use examples such as absences, tardiness, and productivity. 2. Don't get personal. Don't say, "You're too slow producing these reports." Instead, compare the person's performance to a standard. Don't compare the person's performance to that of other people. 3. Encourage the person to talk. Stop and listen to what the person is saying. Ask open-ended questions, such as, "What do you think we can do to improve the situation?" Use a command such as, "Go on." Restate the person's last point as a question, as in, "You don't think you can get the job done?" 4. Get agreement. Make sure the person leaves knowing specifically what he or she is doing right and doing wrong, and with agreement on how things will be improved, and has an action plan with targets and dates. When a supervisor tells someone his or her performance is poor, the first reaction is often denial. Denial is a defense mechanism. By denying the fault, the person avoids having to question his or her own competence. Therefore, dealing with defensiveness is an important appraisal skill. In his book, Effective Psychology of Managers, psychologist Mortimer Feinberg suggests the following. 1. Recognize that defensive behavior is normal. 2. Never attack a person's defense. Don't try to explain someone to themselves, as in, "You know the reason you are using that excuse is that you can't bear to be blamed." Instead, concentrate on the fact, "Sales are down." 3. Postpone action. Sometimes it's best to do nothing. Employees may react to sudden threats by hiding behind their defenses. Given sufficient time, a more rational reaction takes over. 4. Recognize your limitations. The supervisor is probably not a psychologist. Offering understanding is one thing, trying to deal with psychological problems is another. Managers can use the appraisal interview to improve their employees' engagement. Here are relevant findings and implications. Relevant findings and implications of the appraisal interview. 1. Employees who understand how they and their departments contribute to the company's success are more engaged. Therefore, Take the opportunity to show the employee how his or her efforts contribute to the big picture, to his or her team's and company's success. 2. Another study found that the employees' engagement rose when they experienced what the researchers called psychological meaningfulness, namely, the perception that one's role in the organization is worthwhile and valuable. Use the interview to emphasize the meaningfulness to the company of what the employee is doing. 3. Employees who experience psychological safety, namely, the perception that it's safe to bring oneself to a role without fear of damage to self-image, status, or career, were more engaged. Therefore, be candid and objective, but do so supportively and without unnecessarily undermining the employee's self-image. 4. Efficacy drives engagement, so use the interview to make sure your employee has what he or she needs to do a good job. 5. Managers should be candid and honest, but don't unnecessarily emphasize the negatives. Doing so undermines employee engagement. In one survey, Gallup asked about 1,000 U.S. employees to respond to 2 statements. My supervisor focuses on my strengths or positive characteristics, and my supervisor focuses on my weaknesses or negative characteristics. It found out that about 3 times more employees whose managers focused on strengths were engaged, compared with those whose managers focused on weaknesses. 6. Research shows that involvement in decision-making and letting employees voice their opinions improve employee engagement. Use the interview as an opportunity to show your employees that you'll listen to their ideas and value their contributions. 7. Engagement rises when employees have an opportunity to improve their careers. During the interview, discuss the person's evaluation in the context of where he or she sees himself or herself heading career-wise. 8. Research shows a significant positive association between distributive, what rewards people get, and informational, what information they get, justice dimensions, and employee engagement. Bottom line, make sure that the interviewee views the appraisal and the rewards or remedial actions as fair. Performance management. The continuous process of identifying, measuring, and developing the performance of individuals and teams and aligning their performance with the organization's goals. Summary. In the end of this video, we have talked about 1. Managing the appraisal interview. 2. How to conduct the appraisal interview. 3. Guidelines of conducting the appraisal interview. 4. How to handle a defensive subordinate. 5. Employee engagement guide for managers.